Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
Guess who we have on the show this morning? Darwin Porter. Good morning, Darwin, from Staten Island, New York.
Good morning, ANITA, and welcome to the dog days of August.
Why do you think they call them that?
I don't know, because I grew up in the South, and that was a term they used back then because dogs were always lying on the front porch, huffing and puffing for breath. And I think it came from the lazy dogs having a hard time in the hot southern sun.
Oh, okay. Well, listen.
And also that was the mad dog season.
The dogs got mad?
Many dogs, for some reason, had attacks of rabies. So, well, anyway, we'll try to enjoy this August.
Okay. So, yeah. Darwin, so much is happening out there. I have a question, though. I know you have something set to tell us, but what movie now is just going crazy?
Well, it might be the one we talked about on the last show. As we were on the air and talking about 95-year-old Scotty Bowers, and his new movie is Scotty and the Secrets of Hollywood. Newspapers across the country were, for the Sunday editions, getting ready to expose what was called Hollywood's #1 pimp. And now, remember, we got it first, and this movie, Scotty and the Secrets of Hollywood, is part of a larger picture going on right now. Whereas in the olden days, for example, the parents of baby boomers were far more gullible to what was coming out of Hollywood than ultimately the baby boomers themselves, who got a lot hipper. And Hollywood was the dream factory, and they promoted that dream factory into private lives. And more, just shelf after shelf of star biographies are not right. They're very good usually on the career, made this movie, made that movie. But when it comes to personal lives, just book after book is sort of invalid now. I have to rush in to defend myself. Not my books. I've been on to these people for years. I mean, like my book on Katharine Hepburn stirred up a big controversy, and now it's gospel truth, and Marlon Brando and Steve McQueen and Rock Hudson and Olivier and Vivian Leigh. And that was not because I was terribly smart, but I arrived on Madison Avenue in 1960. A young man named John Kennedy was running for president, and we had offices in Hollywood, and all these things coming out were known back then, even Kennedy's private affairs, but they didn't make the press. And now with this 24-hour cable, wow, I mean, it's like almost every other day, secrets are being exposed going back 30 years, and many careers are being destroyed.
Yeah.
And I want to put this in a little perspective. I want to give you two incidents of two stars. They became the two biggest stars in Hollywood. Their careers could have been derailed at the very beginning. And one was Clark Gable, and the other was Cary Grant. And MGM had two men called the Fixers, Eddie Mannix and Howard Strickland, and their job was to suppress a scandal. So it's 1933. Clark Gable has just had all of his rotten teeth out, and he's not ready to get falsies in yet because his mouth is too sore. He's just had gallbladder operation. His wife, Rita Langham, has not gone to bed with him in 4 years. And he's just made what he thought was the worst movie of his life, called It Happened One Night. Of course, in a few months, he would win the Oscar, and that would be one of the most. So, but at that point, he was drinking heavily, and he turned drunk. He was drunk. He was drinking very heavily. He turned the corner on Hollywood Boulevard and struck down fatally an elderly woman.
Oh, my.
And then he stepped on the gas and disappeared. So at home, he called Eddie Manitz. He was called the fixer. And he told Eddie what he had done. Eddie went to work. Of course, he had to bribe the police. He met with the family of the woman and dumped $125,000 on them. Now, in the height of the Depression, $125,000 would be like a couple million today. And he got a lowly, he called it, at MGM to take the rap, which meant 10 months on a, quote, honor farm, and then a lifetime job and a pension with MGM. So, now, Clark Gable then emerged and went on to become the king of Hollywood. Not just with Gone with the Wind, but the king of Hollywood. But his career could have been struck down just as it was taking off. Now, I also mentioned Cary Grant. The legend, and it's in all those Cary Grant books, it's not true, that Mae West saw him walking across the lot of Paramount Pictures as they were casting She'd Done Him Wrong, the movie that skyrocketed her into fame. And she said, that's the man I want. Of course, pretending that she didn't already know him. Actually, in the late 20s on Broadway, he had worked for her as a male prostitute. Now, she didn't make money from that. She found all these chorus boys who worked with her, and they sometimes went a long time between a gig, and they were starving. So she philanthropically started renting them out to older homosexuals so they could eat between shows. And Cary Grant was a male prostitute for Mae West. Now, could you imagine what that story?
No, I can't. And you know, it's interesting, isn't it, that today the smallest infraction is heralded everywhere. But in those days, who other than people like you or the way that you got information, nobody really knew any of this, did they?
No, they didn't. And as I said, our parents were much more gullible, you know. I mean, they believed that Eddie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds were sweethearts, America's sweethearts.
Of course.
Or before then, Van Johnson, whom I knew quite well, and June Allison. I'm sure you remember June Allison.
Of course. They were sweethearts.
Yeah, they were America's sweethearts.
Of course.
Well, behind the scenes, he was gay, and she was a nymphomaniac. but America idolized them. I'm just saying the image and the reality were so different. For example, you know, Spencer Tracy, we talked about him last time. What I didn't tell you, he not only liked young men, he liked young girls, and I mean young.
My gosh.
Including a very tender young Judy Garland, and he was arrested on what they call a jailbait morals rap. And guess who? Eddie Mannix came to the rescue.
Of course.
Because you had to arrive with a bag of money. Again, you know, money talks today. Look at all the scandals going on today. You
right.
know?
Thinking about Michael Cohen, right?
Yeah. Oh, God. Oh, I almost feel sorry for him. So anyway, these things are coming out. But the one thing I want to do a contrast between what someone writes about themselves, called an autobiography, and a more objective appraisal. And the most famous example I could come up with was Miss Nancy Reagan. Now, she did two memoirs. I read both of them, but I read her memoirs of her time in the White House. Now, Kitty Kelly, who she seems to have disappeared, but she was a well-known biographer of the time. She also wrote the biography of Nancy Reagan. Well, it was like an alternative universe. I mean, both of them were supposed to be about Nancy Reagan, but it was a completely different Nancy Reagan. Kitty Kelly wrote about her very notorious years at an MGM starlet, and Ann Edwards, another biographer, said in those days Nancy's telephone was passed around quite a lot, and so before Reagan, she got involved with Clark Gable, Spencer Tracy, and just any number of people, and then she ended up with Reagan, who was sort of a fading actor at the time, but he went on to greater glory, and so did she. But even Nancy's first memoir, I couldn't believe it. She even got her film roles wrong. Now, usually they're dead on target about the films. I mean, there was an actor called Gary Merrill. He was married to Betty Davis, and she put herself in a World War II submarine drama where this American submarine went into the Bay of Tokyo. Well, Nancy was not. That was all men. She wasn't in that movie. So you would think that some secretary should have checked her filmography. Everything Nancy said in her book was true. But, I mean, not the movie book, but the First Lady book. But it was true, but it's what you leave out. I understand that. I mean, for example, Bennett Cerf is still known to some of us who saw this show on TV called What's My Line?
Oh, I remember that.
Bennett was the president of Random House, and he contracted with Marlene Dietrich to write her memoirs. And, of course, Marlene was the femme fatale of the 20th century. He expected some hot memoirs, and then she submitted it. And he called her and said, Marlene, you had a daughter. Was it by the Immaculate Conception? She said, in her memoir, she virtually had no involvement with any man, and certainly not her female affairs. And she even denied that she made German films. And
oh my heavens!
The Blue Angel, the film that shot her to glory, directed by Joseph von Sternberg, her lover. She said that was my first film. So Bennett Cerf at the back of the book had to say, Miss Dietrich was mistaken. Before coming to Hollywood, he listed all the films that she made. So autobiographies should not be read for the complete truth. I was talking one night to Tallulah Bankhead, who had written a memoir in 1952, and we were talking about it, and she said, well, I'm a Southern lady, and no great Southern lady ever allowed truth to get in the way of a good story.
They also didn't tell that I know they didn't tell the truth, because that's how they were, and they called everybody honey, right?
Yes, that's
Darling
right.
and honey.
Darling, mostly darling. I want to give you an example, though, of why they didn't tell the truth. I used to do a book called Frommer Sweden, and the director of tourism for Sweden said, now, is there anything we can arrange for you that we haven't already arranged? And I said, yes, you could grant me one request. I want to go and visit Ingrid Bergman, she was Swedish, like Garbo, and she was in her vacation home on an island off the coast of western Sweden. And he said, well, I'll call Ingrid and say it's to help promote tourism to our country. And she's a very kind and generous woman. So he set up an interview with me. I'd never met her before. And I went there by boat. And now I was a little shocked at the luncheon she served, which I heard is quite common in Sweden in the summertime. But each of us was served a large cooked beet. And that was lunch. And
one large cooked beet?
A big, big beet. the biggest beet you've ever seen.
That's B-E-E-T?
Yes. You know, the purple vegetable.
Right. Now, how did you eat it? How was that prepared? That's very curious because I love beets.
I just cut it into slices and put some salt on it and chowed down. But I told Miss Bergman, I said, I want to write a book on Humphrey Bogart. And you and Bogey, your Casablanca has, in the latest survey, beat out Citizen Kane as the best movie ever made. And I want to talk to you about it. First, I said, there are 15 books on Bogart. In every book, you're quoted as saying, I made the movie with him, but I didn't get to know him. And is that really true? I mean, did you really say? She said, yes, I said that. And what in hell did you think I would say? I was married to Peter Lindstrom at the time. Bogart fell in love with me, and we had an affair.
Oh.
Had I told that, my career would have been destroyed, as it was a few years down the pike when I got involved with Roberta Rossellini.
Right.
And I was virtually kicked out of Hollywood. She said later I came back, but I had to go into exile. That's how dangerous a thing can be. It can destroy. The truth can destroy you. And of course, we're seeing that happen today right in front of us. Just turn on the cable news, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so she made me understand more than anybody how dangerous it is. Even if you wrote a memoir, you don't tell the truth. And I sort of respected her for that. But then when she talked to me, the career was over. You know, she didn't have to worry about keeping secrets anymore. And I found that many stars later on in life, when they don't have a contract or something, they're much more open about what was going on in their lives.
Well, I want to ask you, though, wait, before you go any further, though. So people like that still went on, but they went in shadows, and people knew, not the general public, but the people who were in show business, I guess they knew these things, and I suppose they felt free to do what they wanted to do as they do today, but nobody could hold them down to it because you couldn't find these people. You didn't know what they were doing.
You're absolutely right. In fact, when I arrived in Hollywood, many people were talking about this Scotty Bowers. In fact, I was the first person to write about him long before he became notorious. I wrote about him and his, quote, let's call it his service that he provided. And I wrote about him then. And and people told me that. And it was commonly known. There was only one magazine in the 50s that really zeroed in on a lot of the secrets of Hollywood. It was called Confidential. I'm sure you remember.
I do remember that. Confidential, yes.
Now, they were often wrong, but in retrospect, they were right more than they were wrong. It was like they were publishing shocking news, and they were eventually destroyed by libel suits. That's when they got it wrong. Like one woman went after them was called Maureen O'Hara, and
I remember that red-headed beauty.
That Irish beauty, she was lovely, and they said she was making out with two ushers in the balcony but that wasn't Maureen O'Hara. She was in the Virgin Islands.
Oh, that's funny. I want everyone to know that you're listening to Darwin Porter. Sometimes I get so excited when he calls, I don't mention that to you, but he's you have to get some of his books, and you can go to bloodmoon.com, isn't it? Bloodmoon.com?
Yes, that's right.
And you can see all the books that he writes, and one is better than the other, and you will find out things nobody really knows. And I don't know how we always talk about, how does he know all these things? But he's told us how he knows them.
Yeah, and because really it was common knowledge. But you see, as presidents go, the day of John F. Kennedy is long gone.
Right.
And two presidents and let's don't be partisan here. One was a Democrat and one was a Republican. Bill Clinton and Donald Trump have shown that if you want to run for president in 2020, people are going to go over your life with a fine-tooth comb. I remember Gary Hart once ran for president.
Yes.
He was very popular. In fact, he was leading in the polls, and he defied the reporters to go after him.
Right, they did.
And then suddenly it was Donna Rice was sitting on his lap as he was cruising the Bahamas and out with the presidency. So this is a lesson. Certainly, one of the notorious moments of the presidential campaign was when Donald Trump brought in Juanita Broderick and Paula Jones and one other woman to embarrass Hillary Clinton because not of something she had done, but of Bill Clinton's affairs, and both in and out of the White House. Well, by today's term, Hillary could have brought in 19 other women who have come forward and said, "Hi, Donald. We're here. Hello, Donald."
Amazing.
He shouldn't have done that because, see, I think that moment is going to live and be a lesson to all future candidates. So, if you're going to run for high office, I think you can be exposed today. I think more in Los Angeles and New York, we get more of the scandal than are printed in a lot of local papers. And some of these are minor figures in the art, but almost every day, the New York Post or the New York Daily News has, like the president of CBS. It's just like one thing after another. And often these people have real starchy reputations.
But isn't it ironic, though, I have to interrupt you, Darwin, that we're not finding out all the women who are doing these things. We're only finding out the men.
Well, that day will come.
Then we'll have to have a 10-hour show, right?
Yeah, it's like the men go first, like the men were the first to become president, but I think in the future we'll be more like Germany and England, be ruled by women. But some of these women have, not so much in politics, I found. Women that I've followed many of their careers. Jacqueline Kennedy had a large number of affairs. There was only one that I discovered when I wrote my book on her that she had, because her senator was often not home at night. Her all-time crush was one of my favorite actors, William Holden. But Jackie went on to, after her divorce from Onassis, she did have any number of affairs, which I document, including Warren Beatty.
Okay, but wait. I had to stop you a minute. Do you think that if JFK really were attentive and didn't have extracurricular activities going, that she wouldn't have done that? Wasn't this kind of against what she knew he was doing?
It was almost her friend, including her sister, Lee Roswell, said Jackie believed in payback time.
Yeah, that's what I thought, exactly.
And there have been even movies about women who've done that, What was the old expression? If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander.
Yeah, so I think that a lot of that, because who knows what she would have done if he were not like this. And I get the feeling that that President Bush, the second president, I don't think he did things. I think he was a pretty true husband. We didn't go into all that because we're out of time, actually. But
it appears not his father. We already did a show on that.
Right.
But the son did and was very faithful. But he sowed his wild oats, as my grandmother used to say.
Yes, ahead of time. Exactly.
Well, listen, have a great
Thank
show.
You,
and
Darwin.
Talking to you.
Yeah, and don't go out into the heat and don't be a dog.
Well, when I speak to you again, maybe the winds will be coming into New York from Canada.
Okay. Thank you so much, Darwin. Goodbye.
Bless you. Bless you.